All right. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the FF Face Off as part of the Face Off Sports Network. You can follow us, of course, at fffaceoff.com and on all social media channels. My name is Michael Hoff. You can follow me on X at the FF Realist. I'm joined by Pete Nova, who can be followed at Supernova38. That's with two R's. That's just how damn super he is. And today we're going to be coming at you with some buy low candidates, fantasy football style. We encourage you to like, subscribe, and even engage in the comments. Let us know your thoughts on some of these picks. Some of these picks might be not reaches. Some of these picks might be reaches. That's why we have the channel. So let's get into it. My first pick is going to be Deontay Johnson of the now Carolina Panthers, no longer a Pittsburgh Steeler. He's going off the board as the 84th player, 41st wide receiver. I get it. Carolina is not the sexiest place for a wide receiver. 2023 Bryce Young was an absolute nightmare. I believe in Dave Canales, so he has found a way to get the most out of receivers as he's gone through the NFL. Wide receivers 1 and 2 in his offenses since 2020 have had an average finish of the wide receiver 13 and also have averaged 127 targets. That's a lot of opportunity for Johnson, who's in an offense which was highlighted, at least at the wide receiver position last year, by Adam Thielen. And I love Adam Thielen. If you watch this show, you know, but Adam Thielen is 33 years old. He was the wide receiver 25 last year. Deontay Johnson's just 27 years old. If you're into this sort of thing too, for style purposes, he is rocking number 5. So I like Deontay Johnson. I think right now, as it stands, again, here's a little disclaimer for you. We're recording this in May. So if you're coming across this in June, July, gives you all the more reason to follow the show. Let us know your thoughts on these picks, but watch how these ADPs progress. But Pete, what says you, Deontay Johnson with the Carolina Panthers, 41st wide receiver?
Yeah, I don't hate it. Deontay Johnson, prior to last year, he had 3 years in a row of 140 targets per season. So 147, 169, and 144 from 2022, 2021, and 2020. He's going to command the football. Touchdown wise, not sure how much he'll see the end zone in this offense, just because, I don't know how good the offense will be, but I do know they'll take a step forward with Bryce Young in year 2, with Canal at the helm. So yeah, I definitely don't hate Johnson at this price. And if Adam Thielen, I know Xavier Legette was drafted there, and he's going to be somebody that gets the ball and will be a decent second option. But Deontay Johnson was traded for. He's going to command the football, and he will be the number 1 option there this season. So anytime you get a number 1 option at his ADP price, which is wide receiver 41, I'd say it's a pretty decent swing.
Is it
So
Canal or is it Canalis?
I think it's Canales.
No,
I'm
no.
I'm terrible at I butcher names all the time. I shake your hand in public, and I'll forget and ask you your name
Yeah,
5 minutes
1,000%.
later because
Well,
I
that's why
just
I
never
was worried
remember.
because I'm of the same cloth. So there you go.
But yeah, moving on here, we'll go to my first guy. I'm gonna go with Nick Chubb here. Recent reports said that he started running about a month ago. Reasonably, he's ahead of schedule with his rehab. Remember, he was injured week 2 with a knee injury. He has dealt with knee injuries in the past. So we've seen him be able to rehab. He's disciplined, and obviously he healed up pretty well. Now he is an older back compared to when he first suffered that injury in years past. But I feel pretty confident that he will attack his rehab strong, like he already has been, and he's got a decent chance to maybe even play Week 1. We saw Javonte Williams play Week 1 for the Denver Broncos last year after having a similar injury where he tore all 3 ligaments in his knee. Brees Hall played a majority of the season last year. I think he actually may have started Week 1 as well. His ADP is 114. He's running back 34. And I would even be comfortable enough to maybe even take Jerome Ford as his handcuff. He's going 133. You might be able to wait a round or 2 after you take Chubb and just secure him as just a handcuff. Might take Chubb a little bit to get going, but this is one of the best O-lines in football. And we've seen what Nick Chubb can do when he is healthy. And I'm all in on buying Nick Chubb at this price point.
Yeah, I 1000% agree. Yeah, that injury was on a Monday Night Football in week 2. I know that because I rostered him in my main league, so it hurt
Mm,
that much that early. But that's also the benefit of getting hurt at that point is, just like you said, you have that ability to come back maybe by the start of the season. I mean, you look at the depth chart. I mean, Jerome Ford, sure, he filled in well last year. There's also Hines, there's Deontay Foreman. I mean, there's not a lot of competition to if Chubb is ready, by the way. Like, there's not a lot of competition that's gonna eat into what he's able to do. And you look at those previous years, I mean, he was a regular for 1,000 yards rushing. If
yep.
he's giving you just a fraction of that, a decent fraction of that, which we would expect Chubb to do if he's healthy. I mean, there's no reason why he can't go ahead and take that value. So I like that pick quite a bit. Nick Chubb has always been a guy that I've always tended to roster. So yeah, so I'm all in on Chubb. I'm gonna go with another running back, and this one's gonna sound weird. This is the one I mentioned at the top. Some of these might be reaches. This might sound like a reach in your opinion, but Raheem Mostert going off the board with the 86th pick, the 30th running back off of the board. Is there going to be touchdown regression? Sure. He had 21 last year combined. But you're talking about a running back who was the number 2 running back in fantasy football in half point formats. We're going to drop him down to 30th. It doesn't make much sense to me. Um, is there an overinflated love for Devon A Chain? That tends to happen. It happens a lot on social media. People get hot and bothered by the younger players. Mostert is getting a little bit up there in age, but I mean, he's right now. Devon Achane was the RB 24, and he played in 11 games. So if you have injury concerns with Raheem Mostert, which is fair, what did Achane show you last year? He didn't play a full season. He started the year not playing. He got banged up during the season. So I think I don't think it's unfair to question whether Achane could stay healthy. And by the way, if you need another thing on this, Raheem Mostert's going off the board as the 30th running back. Devon Achane is going off the board as the ninth running back. So you do one of those cost evaluations, you can get Mostert for a lot cheaper later in your drafts than if you drafted A Chain. I mean, 1,000-yard rusher last year. Again, like I said, 21 total touchdowns. Hard to ignore. And the familiarity with a Mike McDaniel offense all the way back to the days in San Francisco where Mostert made a name for himself. So Raheem Mostert, if ADP stay where they are right now, I am going to eye him in every single draft I go into. Pete, what says you?
Yeah, I'm not super high on Mostert just from a redraft standpoint. I'd prefer him more in best ball formats if I'm going to be drafting him, just because there's a lot of targets, or there's a lot of mouths to feed on this offense. But we do know that once this offense gets moving, it's pretty hard to stop. And that's one thing that just plays into the favor of this team. They're moving so fast half the time, and Raheem Mostert, though he's 32, I mean, he is still as fast as he's ever been. In terms of the offensive line, I mean, they're middle of the pack. They were ranked about 19th last year in the NFL for run block rate. But they were in terms of Pro Football Focus, but they were also rated third in the NFL from just a running standpoint. So that means their running backs were just that good that they made a lot out of not so great blocking. It's a good scheme. I think Mostert has the chance to be like maybe like a lower end RB2 that you can maybe get pretty late that can beat expectations out. And to Mike's point, I mean, Devon Achane, the hype and the inflation that he has right now is going to push the other two backs down on the board. And I'm not touching Achane at that ADP with the injury concerns that he's had. Mostert has been fairly healthy since joining the Dolphins, and he's also just re-signed a 2-year deal, and they can pretty much get out after one. So I think they're going to probably grind him into the ground as much as they can, and it's probably going to be closer to a 50-50 split between him and Achane, and they probably will feature Jalen Wright. Get him involved a little bit, the rookie as well. But I see him maybe even out touching Devon Achane when it comes to rushing attempts this year. It really wouldn't surprise me at this point.
I wouldn't surprise me at all either. That was one of the things that I looked at a lot too. I mean, Moser had a lot more touches last year, but even if that's closer, and even if there's a drop off in the 21 touchdowns that I mentioned, I mean, Moser. could and should, in my opinion, finish better than A-Chain, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he had I mean, Raheem Mostert and granted, so did A-Chain, had a very high breakaway run rate, but
Yes.
Was ranked 4th in the NFL for total breakaway runs. His juke rate was 7th in the NFL. He was a pretty productive running back last year, in this offense. I think pretty much anybody that touches the ball is gonna be productive in this offense, especially at the running back position because
Yep.
there's so much stress on the defense with Hill and, Jalen Waddle. So yeah, don't hate it. Moving on to my second guy and our fourth guy on the list. Kendre Miller is the 46th running back on the board ADP wise here on 5/20/2024. He's going 153rd on the board total. And Kendre Miller was a top 100 pick last season. He shares a room with Jamal Williams uh, and Alvin Kamara. And, those are two decent backs, but they're both veterans that I don't know. I don't know if they're going to hold up. And I also feel like Miller has a chance to even get close to a 50-50 split. I'm not worried about Jamal Williams. It's more about Kamara, but this team ran the football the 10th most in the NFL last year. Kendre Miller was a highly touted prospect coming out, and some liked him as the one of the higher backs coming out of this rookie class in 2023. I think he's going to have a solid year. I don't think they want to throw the football nearly as much with Derek Carr. And they did make some improvements on this offensive line this offseason. They did take offensive line in the first round with Tylese Fuaga. And I think they're going to try to run the football even more than they did last year, which was 10th in the league. And so I like Kendre Miller to take a step forward. The last thing I'll say on him is he didn't look great out of the gate in the NFL last season, but as the season progressed, his touches became more efficient and he looked like he was more comfortable. So he dealt with some injuries to begin the year, but I think a fully healthy Kendre Miller to start the season with a full off season has a chance to be a productive back in the system.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the biggest knock you can put on Miller right now is again, just like you said, what made you a little apprehensive with this pick was being Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara last year was one of 5 running backs in half point formats with less than 5 games. I'm sorry, scoring less than 10 points. That would be Christian McCaffrey, Kyron Williams, David Montgomery, Raheem Mostert, Alvin Kamara. So there is some impressiveness in front of Kendre Miller, but I agree. I think that in order for the Saints to succeed on offense, I think they know this after 1 year. Maybe it's a little bit of buyer's remorse. Derek Carr is not the guy who's going to lead you to every single win. So I do think that we see an opportunity here where Kendre Miller can get a good sample size. He could be one of the better backup running backs to own in fantasy football. So I like this pick quite a bit. Um, we'll see how this offensive line works out, in my opinion, but I like the pick of Kendre Miller. I've gotten him already in some best ball drafts. So I am all on board with that. And if I can go to my last pick, if I could scroll, it's going to be Brandon Cooks. Yes, Brandon Cooks of the Dallas Cowboys. If you know this show, if you know me, I am not one who is quick to point out a Dallas Cowboy, but I think this is absurd. Brandon Cooks right now, ADP wise, the 143rd player off the board, the 62nd wide receiver. He's the Dallas Cowboys wide receiver too. I don't think there's a question of that either. And I mean, he was the wide receiver 36 last season. The Cowboys were 11th in pass play percentage last year with 59.29%. And if you look at Brandon Cook's career, if you played fantasy football long enough while Brandon Cooks has been in the NFL, you know he's always one of those guys that you draft later and he always produces for you, whether it's best ball, whether you give him a round on DFS, whether you're drafting him in redraft. He is a guy who gets drafted late, who always produces. This is his resume. I, for the life of me, cannot figure out. And you also, by the way, you look at the Dallas Cowboys running back depth chart. They brought back Ezekiel Elliott. Beyond that, and I like Ezekiel Elliott, but most people would say he is washed. Look at the depth chart beyond Ezekiel Elliott. and tell me that the Dallas Cowboys are not going to be in a position to continue that 59.29 pass percentage. I think Brandon Ayuk benefits greatly from this. The tight ends, yes, the tight ends will eat in Dallas, no doubt. But I like Brandon Cooks a ton in this spot compared to other players you can get there. Again, the 143rd player. I love you, Brandon Cooks. So, Pete, what says you? Any thoughts there? Brandon Cooks going that late doesn't that seem absurd to you, or am I just a Cooks fanboy?
I think it's ageism with Brandon Cooks. I think people are so excited about the young
Always
players that it
ageism in
kind of
fantasy.
clouds their judgment. It's always ageism. But he's not even 31 yet, which he's 30 years old, and I get it. He's not the sexiest pick. We've seen him in the league for a really long time now. But to Hoff's point, I mean, look, this team threw the ball the 10th most in football last year. I believe it was 10th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, eighth most in football last year. And we can
Mm.
only expect that number is going to go up. Dak is on a contract year, unless you are a conspiracy theorist and think that they're going to try to, put Dak in a bad position and maybe not put the ball in his hands as much to lower
Yeah.
his price tag. But I don't think that'll be the case. But the only fear is maybe Jake Ferguson's wide receiver too there, but outside of that, this running back room is really not good. Rico Dowdle, Ezekiel Elliott. I just don't see this offense running the football more this year than they did last year, which is going to increase passing attempts. And you got to assume that Cooks will be a beneficiary of that if he can stay on the field and be healthy for the full season. I don't mind buying him at this price as a solid depth piece. He played 16 games last season, 81 targets, not terrible. And that's also with Gallup is now gone, and Tony Pollard is no longer there as well. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that room shakes out. But I don't hate Brandon Cooks at this price point. I think it's a pretty decent value. I definitely think he's better than wide receiver 62. There's a lot of rookies that are in front of him that probably won't even come close to what he produces from a fantasy standpoint this season. Um, Coming to our last pick here, it's going to go with Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray right now is quarterback 10, and he is the 68th player off the board per Fantasy Pros at the moment today. He's never finished outside of the top 11 in fantasy. Last year, he came back from an injury, right? And he didn't play the full season, right? He played 8 games, 18.9 fantasy points per game. And then in 2022, when he did get hurt, he averaged 18.9 points per game, which was good for 7th in the NFL in terms of fantasy points per game at the quarterback position. So I mean, this is probably maybe a hot take, but I think this is probably the best offense he's had weapons wise in a few years. And that's because Trey McBride is taking another step forward and looks like he can be an elite option. He broke out last year. Marvin Harrison joins the fold, and not for nothing, Zay Jones is a quality receiver, and he's going to be there to provide some help. And Kyler's going to be able to do it with his legs a little bit too. They bring in Trey Benson, another offensive weapon. That offensive line is going to get another year older with a lot of the young guys they brought in last year. So I think Kyler Murray could be a very sneaky play to even finish top 5 in fantasy this season. And if you're one of those guys that doesn't draft quarterbacks high and you can get him at the quarterback 10,
Yeah.
he's got a chance to maybe even finish in the top 5.
As much as I would love to disagree with you on any of your picks, yet again, and am agreeing with you, Kyler Murray is a great pick. And to me, I say this a lot during the offseason, and I'll say it more as we move towards these drafts, which again, by the way, stick with us, FF Face Off, throughout the summer, as we will continue to do these sorts of things as ADPs progress. But yeah, Kyler Murray is one of the players who is the epitome of waiting at the position. I mean, you mentioned he played in 8 games last year. He had 4 games with more than 20 points scored. He didn't
Yeah.
have any games with less than 10 points scored. So you're getting your fantasy points there. And while I agree that it is a hot take to say this is the best offense that Murray has played in, I don't know if it's too hot for me to not stand next to you and agree with you.
Yeah.
I like Marvin Harrison there. I like Trey Benson there. You also have James Conner there.
Mhm.
So I think that there is an opportunity, and I'll say this as someone who is a diehard Niner fan, I can tell you this: the Arizona Cardinals do not quit. They play teams tough. They
They
played
do.
teams tough last year. That's a huge credit to Jonathan Gannon. So yeah, I like this pick a lot. I think Kyler Murray. Now you mentioned top five. That might be a little too spicy for me,
Sure.
but not enough for me to say he is not worth a pick at his current price point. So I
Well, hey,
like this pick of Kyler Murray.
listen, he finished top 5 in fantasy points scored, in 2 seasons already, 3 and 4, and if you take out
Yeah.
his rookie year where he finished 11, he's pretty much finishing top 5 in 50%, outside of his rookie year, and again, last year and the year before, he didn't finish the full season, so it'll be interesting to see, but, this was fun, and I hope we can do this a little bit more going forward.
And we shall. And with that, folks, that is again 6 players to buy low on in fantasy. I will tell you again in closing, be sure to visit fffaceoff.com. Be sure to like, subscribe. If you have an opinion on any and all of these players, please comment. We will answer. Until next time, stay thirsty, be kind to one another. We'll catch you on the flip side. Cheers.